Welcome to Leading the Way podcast, where you'll learn neuroscience-backed ways to lead more effectively and have more fun at work with what you already have. Hey there, it's Chris from Leading the Way, and I'm so glad to have my amazing guest, Steffan, with us today. Steffan, thank you so much for being on Leading the Way today.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me, Chris. I look forward to this.
Yeah, this is going to be really exciting. Before we jump right in, I want to make sure folks know who the heck you are, because I know, but they don't know yet. So, Steffan is the author of the book, The Way of the Co-Creative Leader, which we're going to talk about a bit today. And he's the founder of Surdek Solutions, a company specializing in leadership development, and they're based in Montreal, Canada. Steffan believes in contributing to a greater cause and making a difference in organizations by helping leaders develop their co-creative leadership skills. He helps those leaders transform their mindset and leadership style to increase trust, commitment, and engagement from the people all around them. And he also enables these missing conversations, this conversational debt that we'll talk about, that provoke new possibilities and inspire teams to work and communicate more effectively together. Steffan, again, so glad to have you on the show and leading the way and learn from you. I'm sure the audience is as well. Just to kick things off, one of the things I noticed recently for you, you were on a speaking tour a little bit, and we're talking a bit about conversational debt. What is
Yeah,
conversational debt?
it's funny because everyone knows conversational debt once I explain it.
Yeah.
Conversational debt basically represents all the conversations that you're not having in your life that you should be having in your life. And
Mm,
this could be between you and your spouse, you and your kids. It could be professionally with your boss, with your colleagues, things that aren't being said. So if I gave you a very basic example from a professional point of view, um, imagine a team that has a daily meeting every day at 9 o'clock. And there's this one person that doesn't show up on time, that never shows up on time. They're
mm,
always 10 minutes late, 15 minutes late. No one talks about it in the meeting because everyone's waiting for the boss to talk about it with the person. And if
right,
the boss doesn't talk about it with the person, then the behavior just doesn't change. So
right.
conversational debt is about those conversations that aren't happening, that should be happening. And because they're not happening, it creates chaos.
Got it. Got it. And that great example you gave too, I would imagine that thing slowly kind of eats away at the ethos of the group. And I mean, we've all had that happen in our careers. If you've been in it for a while, there's
Exactly.
something that's not
Because
talked about. And if it were just addressed, that frees up so much energy, right?
exactly. And because you're not talking about it, then someone else sees this behavior on the team and says, well, if Chris can come in 10 minutes late, I guess I can come in 10 minutes late too.
Right.
And then someone else may decide the same thing. And it's a very basic example, but it applies in many different contexts in business.
Nice, nice. And are there ways to approach that? Because I would imagine some of the reason that that happens is folks are afraid or not sure how to act or, not sure what to
Yeah,
do
let's
next.
let's talk about that a little bit. Why aren't people talking about it? Some of the common reasons. First of all, if it's in a business context, people don't necessarily feel legitimate for speaking out and saying this. It's like, who am I to say this to my colleague?
Mm,
He's my peer. She's my peer. I'm not supposed to say this. I'm not legitimate to say this.
mm,
And mostly what I find that hides behind that is kind of the second point, which is we're afraid of the reaction.
yeah,
We're afraid of how is the person going to take it if I say this. And the third thing is that sometimes we're afraid nothing is going to change anyways. So why
mm,
bother?
mm. Yeah, and
So
that's
inside the
go ahead, sorry.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
I was going to say that that's interesting because I'm curious if it's suggesting there's other things going on that people maybe don't feel safe showing up at work, right? And this is just a little symptom of that.
Yes. And sometimes it could be something in that work environment, or sometimes it could be something in the work history or the life history of that specific person. So
Mm,
maybe I worked in this other company before and I wasn't supposed to say these things. Now I'm in this new company. I guess I'm still not supposed to talk about it. I'm carrying the baggage over, so to
yeah.
speak.
Yeah. Yeah, that can be human nature too, unattended. We tend to carry lots of stuff around from job to job
Yeah.
and life to life. Right.
And
Now,
when you look at it from a
go-
human perspective,
yeah.
sometimes it's just, how do I bring it up?
Mm,
How can I bring it up in a way that's not going to upset the other person?
right.
So it's because I don't feel equipped. We don't learn this at school. All this soft skill communication stuff, we don't learn about, we never learned about this at school.
Right.
So people are very uncomfortable. And I tend to work with a lot of tech teams,
Mm,
and the people that are in tech are typically more introverted. So it's
yes.
even harder for them to say, okay, I'm going to speak up about this.
Right. Right. No, that's very true. And it's I love how you say we don't learn it in school. It's literally just a skill that we can develop like any other skill. Like a developer learns how to code in a different programming language. They can learn, albeit it might be more challenging for them, a
Yeah,
skill in how to approach things, to bring that up. That's so good. And I would imagine too, people are just going to use whatever they have from their family of origin to handle this, which might be ill-equipped to deal with. It's not even
exactly.
conflict. It's just calling out something that might be upsetting or concerning, right?
Well, we should redefine conflict a little bit here too, because
Okay.
usually when we use the word conflict, we see this as this big thing. But conflict can be as basic as a difference of opinion.
Mm,
And a difference of opinion doesn't need to degenerate in any way. But when we use conflict, it's kind of sometimes we load it up with words like people screaming, with something going wrong,
right.
with very emotional, and it's all these mental links that we make that in the end prevent us from having these discussions. I was
Right.
talking to someone on my team yesterday. She may hate me sharing this story, but the person was telling me she needed to have a difficult conversation with someone. And she said, can I just bounce ideas off of you about this? Because you're that guy. So I said, yeah, sure. And in the end, um, it was very easy. All that person needed to say was, I just don't feel like I should be doing this project. No
Mm,
big explanations, no justifications, no over analysis, long discussion. Let the person convince you. I just don't want to be part of this project anymore. It doesn't suit me. I'm
mm.
not comfortable.
So
So
good. Just stand in her
all
truth
the
and say the
drama,
thing, right?
yeah, all the drama that we create around is drama that we create around. We make it more difficult than it needs to be.
Right. It's so true. It's the movies in our head, right, have this like a Marvel movie production value, right? And it's
Yeah,
usually Thor and Hulk and all those aren't really involved in it. It's a lot smaller in reality, but we've made up this massive movie. Speaking from experience, I've certainly done that myself more than once. I'm
yeah. It's
curious. Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say it's the stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I'm curious how this melds into, I know you talk a lot about co-creative leadership. That might be even a term that you coined yourself. What is that, and does that relate to this conversational debt? Is that a pillar or part of that, or they just coexist?
They're they coexist because co-creative leadership kind of comes out. I'm a senior leadership advisor. I work with leaders to help them develop their co-creative leadership skills, but sometimes I also work with management teams just to help them learn to talk to each other in a more productive, constructive way. Essentially, I'm teaching them what it means to be a team.
Mm,
And co-creative leadership comes from 10 years of experience teaching leaders, working with leaders, and co-creative leadership. What I'm trying to do with that is kind of take away this idea that the leader knows all the problems, the
mm,
leader needs to know all the solutions.
mm.
I try to position it instead like, no, the leader's role is kind of to lead the orchestra, so to speak, and to manage the system in a certain direction and to help your team, grow, evolve together, work as a team together, but also to take ownership of things. I've
Nice.
I've worked with so many leaders over the years that have told me things like, In meetings, when as soon as I bring an idea, everyone says, "Yeah, Chris, great idea. Let's do that." I want to be challenged.
Mm,
I want people to tell me it's a bad idea.
mm,
I want people to bring their own idea.
right.
So as leaders, we don't always know how to ask. But
Yeah.
the funny thing is, people on the ground, they know the problems, they have ideas for solutions, but we never ask.
Yeah. Right.
So co-creative leadership is about giving more people a voice. It's
Love it.
about enabling the dormant leaders in your organization. As a leader, it's about how can you be a voice among many inside the conversation, bring your idea, and it would sound the same as if anyone else brought an idea and people would challenge it because we're trying to come up with the best solution for the business.
Right. Right. It's so powerful too because as a leader when I was in corporate and I used skills that weren't as developed as this is earlier in my career, there's a lot of weight on your shoulders. If you're the leader and it's your solution and you've got potentially some adversarial stuff from your team because you're not listening to them, as you said so well, and they might disagree with you, and your solution might not be perfectly on target, and a little
Yeah.
fine tuning would get there. And then all that loads on you as a leader. So it makes it so much more stressful versus, how do you leverage the brilliance of everyone on your team or even most of them on the team, right? Maybe folks aren't 100% engaged, but even 60% engagement's better than 20, right? And I would imagine it's a lot more fun for leaders in co-creation once they learn the skill and maybe let go of I've got to be in control and it's a command control situation. Do you see that when with your clients? Is there a relief for leaders as they move to this once they learn
Yes.
about it?
Yes. There's a lot of relief for the leaders. And eventually, I find when I look at them, it's a little bit like watching a Jedi or a Padawan in Star Wars learning to use the Force.
Yeah.
And then when they start getting it, it's like, ooh, but I want to do more of this.
Yeah.
But I want to come back to something that you said. Um, you were talking about the way that you were expressing earlier how leaders um, live through this, how they experience
Hmm.
this. One key thing that you didn't mention is that leaders are creating this paradigm for themselves.
Hmm.
No one is telling them they need to know everything. No
Right.
one is telling them they need to come up with all of the solutions. It's the pressure that leaders put on themselves.
Wow. So it's all
So when
self-created.
in a way it is. And it's because of what we've learned, what we've seen over the years as we were leading in companies, what we've seen from our leaders. And then we say, well, that's leadership and we need to be that. Well, what if you don't?
Right.
There's different ways of leading.
Right. Right. I love it. I would imagine too that, you mentioned you work with technical teams, but there's all sorts of innovation, right? And marketing and finance and everything else. And, sometimes people will say, oh, I'm not in a technical team, so I can't innovate. And, I struggle with that when I hear that because there's always little improvements and we can always listen to folks, what's going on. You have any reaction to that? I know you work mostly with technical teams, but I would imagine there's this possibility for co-creative leadership in finance, in marketing,
It's
even in HR.
it's the exact same principle. It's
Yeah.
how can you ask people and how can you ask people without necessarily having a solution in mind? Like,
Mm.
one of the traps that I see leaders fall in is they're seeing the problem and then they come up with a solution in their mind and then they say, "Hey, I'm going to be collaborative. I'm going to ask my team for their ideas." And
Right.
then they listen for that idea from their team. They want that idea to come up. And if that idea doesn't come up, they go, "No, no, no, no. No, I don't think that would work. Oh no, and then people have a feeling, Chris, if you know what you want, can you just tell me?
Yeah. Yeah. Boy, and I, I would imagine too, an ideal state, correct me where I'm wrong, because I probably am, but ideal state would be some sort of ability to prototype, let's try this thing out, right? And not just
Yeah.
hope for the best, but let's try out a few of these ideas. Is that part of co-creative leadership, do you think? Like the prototyping phase?
That's that's the fifth key skill, which is fostering an environment of learning by doing.
Okay.
So, as a co-creative leader, what you want to do is you want to encourage your teams exactly what you said. take a step forward. What is it that you want to try here? Um, the thing is, in most companies, there's kind of this fear of failure going
Mm,
on in many
mm,
companies, right? So people don't always want to try. They're not always comfortable uh, experimenting with things.
right.
And as a leader, I find that, we talk a lot about the right to make mistakes inside of companies.
Sure.
And we say, oh, yeah, we need to give the permission to make mistakes, fail fast. We have all these cool expressions.
Right.
Hot, hot news flash. I think all of that is bull crap,
Yeah.
because in the end, there's a culture inside the company.
Yes.
And when people have a reluctance to do that, it's not because you say, no, it's okay, you're allowed to make mistakes,
Mm,
that people are magically going to say, really? Okay, well, let me try then.
right.
There, there's a history, there's an experience that people have had.
Right.
And here's the thing, there are some mistakes that people can make that are fireable offenses.
Sure.
So now all of a sudden, I told you, Chris, you have a right to make mistakes.
Right.
Oh, but not that one, because we're going
Right.
to fire you for that one, because that one was really bad.
Right.
So in the world of co-creative leadership, I tend to focus more around, you want to do this, Chris? What are you trying to learn by doing this?
Mm,
And now let's talk about that. Oh,
right.
okay, that makes sense. Oh, I want to see if it works. Well, come on. Tell me a bit more. What are you actually trying to learn? Like, if
Right.
it does work, what will have, what are you going to have learned by doing this? And
Nice.
then I can go back to you and say, so Chris, did you try what you told me? Yeah. What did you learn? I learned this. I learned that. Okay. What do you want to do next now based on what you learned?
Nice. Nice.
And
That's I,
move it
I
from
love that
there.
too, because there's some framework of agreement on from the leader and their contributor on there's kind of a packaging of where this innovation can occur. So we're not going to tack way over here necessarily, right? We're a company, we're here to serve these people. We've got some initiatives, we've got some funding, we have some inertia this way. So for folks that can't see me, I'm kind of holding my hands up. There's this realm where innovation's probably more welcome, and then as we go further away, it can be probably more challenging to say. But I love that, what did you learn? Because even if you go outside of that, you learn something that maybe you can bring back, in that channel that you tack in to have ideas.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And then if there's a mistake, you can talk about the mistake.
right,
And some mistakes aren't a big deal. Some
right,
mistakes are a bigger deal, but we can talk about the mistake in the context of, this is a mistake.
right,
But sometimes we experiment, we try things, we know it's going to fail. We
right,
know the point is to go and to learn something. So let's
right.
not call that a mistake, because
Love it.
we know it's going to mess up from the start.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard in my tech career too, very similar to what you're saying, and really the same is, folks will call it throwaway work, and I'm like, it really wasn't throwaway work. You learned how to code and XYZ, or you learned what not to do, or you learned how to build or not build interfaces. Like there was a learning there, and especially in the tech world, the more you learn, the quicker you can learn new things, which is incredibly important with, code bases and the alphabet soup from Amazon changing every week. It seems like you've got to learn very, very quickly and produce. And so there really isn't throwaway work if this is done right. It's
And to
it's
come,
building them stronger and stronger, right?
yeah, and to come back to something that we were discussing earlier, um, you were asking me, does this idea of learning by doing, does it apply outside of tech? Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And at the same time, to come back to something else you were saying, maybe we're not going to tackle this thing way out here in left field. Well,
Right.
maybe not right away, but by doing multiple small steps, maybe we're going to get to the big one.
Mm,
Because sometimes we make the mistake of saying, I need to fix this big thing right away. But if
right.
I fix it, like, a few small changes a month, it may take me 6 months to change, but after 6 months, I'm going to be in a different place. So it's
Right.
about looking forward and saying, what's the first increment of this? What's the first step of this that delivers something tangible
Nice. Yeah,
and
I
that I
love
can
that.
use right away?
Yeah. I love that. It's so important to have in the mix. I've noticed in larger organizations, you probably have too, is they'll have these giant portfolio projects, multi-month, multi-year, heavy, backloaded. So the end of the project for deliverables, massive amount of structure, and sadly, usually not any sort of experimentation on the front end or notice of continued development, or even worse, what happens when you're quote unquote done and you're in sustainment mode, right? It's it's the hope that there's big bang that's going to change the world and your corporate world, and then and it's funny, human beings, we're funny. We're surprised that that thing didn't do it right all the way as we expected. That new software
Yep.
package, that new initiative. Whereas those little things have such a higher chance of success because they're more on target. The individual contributors have a relationship with the customer, which is super powerful, and they can iterate quickly. So I mean, it's exciting. I think as I see more companies, and it's not even necessarily agile. It's just what's the small thing that I can do continual development on and move the dial on. And you're right. Over time, and really not that much time, it moves. And it's, do you see more engagement with those sorts of activities with teams? Because a lot of folks are talking about lack of
Yes.
engagement and millennials this and checked out that and folks working remote and they're not engaged. But I would imagine in this co-collaborative environment, there's a role everyone has in this. And so do you see more engagement because of that?
Yes, I see the engagement because what typically happens, as I said, in the model where the leader comes up, knows the problems, and the
Yeah.
leader comes up with the solutions. What happens is sometimes people don't feel heard on the ground.
Mm,
So now, this initiative to solve X problem, XYZ problem in the company, people don't necessarily believe in it because people say, well, this was Stefan's idea. And Stefan came out of this out of the blue. He never listened to us. And then magically, in those circumstances, what often happens is people don't have time to work on the
mm,
change. They don't have time to work on the transformation because
mm.
they're busy with the actual work. That's the kind of wording I hear sometimes on the ground.
Yeah.
And really, they talk about it as Stefan's project, not our project.
Right.
But if you're doing, like, one thing I like to do with clients when I'm doing some sort of transformation work, and this is whether it's IT or not, because I do work with non-IT folks sometimes, I'll tend to have a workshop where we kind of do a snapshot of where we're at now,
Mm,
and then we do a little snapshot of what can we do to improve.
mm,
And out of that, what we do is we create what I call a 90-day plan. And in our 90-day plan, go, what are we trying to fix in the next 90 days?
mm.
And every week, we focus on that 90-day plan. One of the big problems with engagement and with transformation and those types of things, is there's going to be this great big kickoff meeting for the transformation.
Right.
And then 1 month after, everyone forgot
Right.
because we never talk about it. We don't keep it alive. So if you want to increase the engagement, talk about it regularly. Have measurable objectives. Ask people, what is it that you feel you can do to contribute to this?
Mm.
And let's put some of these things down. Let's create a little plan around it that makes sense and move from there. But that
Nice.
definitely increases engagement when you regularly talk about this change you're trying to create.
Right. And it makes it a living thing instead of how you so well said. It's there's a kickoff meeting or someone, the equivalent of painting the ethos on the wall, and it becomes invisible after a time, right? If you're not living it and acting out of that. The other that's nice is, some of these changes can feel so big and huge. And so, our C-level executives will have this beautiful vision to serve customers or make lives easier or reduce costs or, save the world. And then it's not broken down from there, right? At level down, like, hey, what do
Yeah.
I do today to make that happen? As much as I love that, like, am I doing that? Is this status report I'm doing helping move the dial on that?
Yeah.
Um, and
You're right.
and this just compartmentalizes it, or that's probably the wrong word, but it makes it actionable, like right in front of them. Here's something we can do together. I love that.
Yeah.
So,
And, if I may,
yeah,
we talked about co-creative leadership. Can I just introduce the 5 skills
I
quickly?
would love it if you were. That's what I was going to ask.
Okay. So, there's 5 key skills that I found over time that is useful for co-creative leaders to learn, and that's what helps you be more and more of a co-creative leader.
Okay.
So, the first one is being a voice among many inside the
Mm,
conversation. So,
mm,
this goes to what I was saying earlier. As a leader, how can you make it so that you never have to speak last, but you can speak at any time and be part of a discussion and be challenged or challenge people? And also, another part of being a voice among many in the conversation is being able to help people understand each other.
mm,
So, understanding what is it that Chris brings to meetings? What is it
mm,
that Stefan brings to meetings? What is it that, and helping those people have a voice in the meeting, helping them highlight ideas, helping people converge. The second key skill of a co-creative leader is unleashing the leaders around you. So I like to say in companies, there's this creature that exists in every company that's called dormant leaders.
mm,
And dormant leaders are these people in companies that have great leadership skills. Ask them what they do outside of the office. They are the coaches of your kids' sports teams. They
mm,
get involved in all sorts of cool ways in their community. But at work, they don't have a title that says they're a leader, so they don't bring any of that because there's
mm,
no room for them to do that.
mm.
So leaders are supposed to create leaders, and that's why I say unleash the leaders around you.
Nice.
The third key skill is developing the capacity of your team. So, as a leader, what we want to do is we want to develop our team. We want to develop our management team. We want to develop the people inside our organizations.
Hmm.
And the trap that many leaders fall into is they say, "Oh, I have a training budget. Yeah, I pay training for people."
Right.
But to develop capacity as a leader, you need to be able to be a teacher sometimes.
Mm,
You need to remember what it means for people to be learners and the struggles that come along with being a learner.
right.
The fourth key skill is around dancing with the system. So, how can I run my organization using a more systemic point of view, more fluid? Uh, I can do some back and forth. I call it dancing because when I work with clients, sometimes, I think that we've overcome a certain hurdle. And then I'll go see them one morning. We have a conversation. It's like, oh, okay, well, we're right back to go. Okay,
Mm,
let's go back. And it's a back and forth. You do something, the system adjusts. You do something, the system adjusts. Then
mm.
you need to adjust at whatever the system did. So it's this back and forth, this dance. And finally, the fifth key skill is fostering an environment of learning by doing.
Nice.
So, as a leader, are you the bottleneck for your team trying anything because you need that perfection starting out? Or can you encourage your team to do small increments like we were talking about earlier? So, those are the 5 key skills.
Nice. I love that model. It's very consumable, right? I can see where you can lead to action and all of those. It's sometimes these models sound really good, like we're just talking about, and to put them into action is challenging, but it's beautiful. It seems to flow really well. I'm imagining you've worked with a number of clients that have enjoyed success applying these, and that's how you build it over the years, yeah?
Yes. Well, what I've found, it's funny how it started because it actually started at, I was at a user group one night in Montreal back in, I think it was December 2014, something like that, just to say how long it was.
Mm,
And I was doing a leadership talk, and at the end there was a Q&A. So people asked me, Stefan, what's the one thing that leaders really need to develop to be able to be better leaders inside organizations? And
mm,
I went on this rant, and I swear I have it something, I still have it to this day on my hard drive somewhere. And at the end of the rant, I said, it's easy. Leaders just need to learn how to be more co-creative with their
mm,
people. So
mm.
in one sentence, co-creative leadership was born.
Nice.
And then I wrote about the 5 key skills. There's a website that asked me to write about them. They said, could you tell us more about co-creative leadership? So I said, what am I going to write? And I basically made up those 5 key skills based on my experience. I made them
Mm,
up on the fly for this article. And to this day, it's the same 5 key skills. It's the same thing that I teach people. I just learn when I work with leaders which bucket is does your challenge fit in, and how do
nice.
we want to address it?
Nice. That's lovely. It's like divine inspiration and simplicity and all the things. That's awesome. I love it. So
What
go ahead.
what I like with the leaders that I coach is that sometimes the way we apply this is that I'll ask them, what are some of the challenges that you're trying to deal with right now?
Mm,
So sometimes, that I don't know, I'll pull out an example like this. Sometimes some leaders have struggles with people in other departments. I go, okay, so that's probably dancing with the system.
sure.
So how can we dance with the system on this one? What is the system telling you? How is the system acting with you?
Mm,
Okay, so the system is acting this way, and we need to make the system pivot. Now, what can we do?
right.
So, a very basic example that we've done with the client is they were working with someone in another department. And when they had meetings with executives, people in that department would drop little bombs, little
Mm,
verbal grenades in the meeting
mm,
with the executives.
mm,
And the people on my client's team would look bad, and they'd get angry every time. And they talked to me about it. And eventually we came up with a strategy where one meeting, the leader of the group I was working with said, uh, Chris, I have a question. Right after Chris dropped the bomb,
right.
the leader asked Chris, said, Chris, I don't understand. So the person says, what don't you understand? It says, our goal this year was to focus on collaborating better together, on
Mm,
improving our collaboration. Now, when you come to these management meetings and you drop these bombs to make us look silly, how does that help our collaboration? Can you tell me that?
wow.
And he did that in front of the same executives that for the mini grenade, the verbal
Hmm.
grenade
Hmm.
that the person had tossed. Well, it took 2 meetings, and then the grenade stopped because
Wow.
the person was tired of looking foolish because they couldn't explain.
Yeah. Nice. And if they really had something, you could have that conversation, right? Instead of this passive aggressive just kind of
Exactly.
thing happening.
Exactly.
Right.
And the idea was to invite a conversation. Okay, knowing in this case the conversation would probably not happen,
Right.
but it was a way to say, you're trying to put us on the spot. Let us just turn the mirror around and see now how you're composing with this.
Nice.
What we accept is, the standard at which people are going to treat us.
Mm,
So change the standard. This is as part of this, I call it change the game.
nice.
This is the part of dancing with the system that I call change the game. If
Okay.
you don't like the game that people are playing with you, well, invent new rules, change the game, and then let them see what happens when they play your game.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, it's such a good
And
analogy too, because we can, as humans, get locked into it has to be this way. And
yeah,
like you've said so well, excuse me, a couple times is we've just made it up. So we can make
yeah,
up other things that serve us better around this. That's
yeah.
wonderful.
But but what I like when I work with leaders is that we're literally able to always find 1 or 2 skills to apply, and
Mm,
then the leader has something to try concrete.
yeah,
I'm not the type of person that likes theory. I hate the coaches that find all these models. You ask them how do they apply them in real life, and they have no clue.
right.
I hate that
Yeah,
type of coach. That's not me.
right.
Me, it's concrete, boots on the ground. Let's try something and see what happens.
Love it. Well, that's such a refreshing and such a needed approach from what I've seen in the corporate space. And I'm curious for folks listening, what's a great way for them to begin to engage with you about this? Because there's a great need, and you've clearly identified all sorts of amazing ways that you could work with clients. Is it the book? Is it your website? How would they best engage with you?
The the book is a great first way to get to know a little bit of my style, to get to know what I talk about, to get the basics around co-creative leadership.
Okay.
And you can find that on co-creativeleadership.ca. It'll
Okay.
point you, talks a bit about the book. It has links to different websites online where you can purchase the book. So that's a great starting point. Aside from that, there's our blog on my website on surdek.com. In the blog section, we have around 200 articles now,
Wow.
videos, podcasts, of things that I've written in the past 10 to 12 years around leadership, conscious leadership, co-creative leadership, leadership development. There's a ton of content there to immerse
Mm.
you in your world. And then the best way is just to reach out. So feel free, anyone listening, to connect to me on LinkedIn and to say that you heard this conversation with Chris and you'd like to talk more about something. And it can just be a conversation. I enjoy the teaching part of it.
Nice. Thank you so much. We'll put that in the show notes. So if you're on your commute or on the treadmill, don't hurt yourself. So it'll be in the show notes. You can find it and click and go there. And really enjoyed the conversation today. And always, before I wrap up, I love to ask an amazing guest, what's something that you're grateful or thankful about right now?
Well, actually, if you're asking right now, I'm grateful to you to have this opportunity to have this conversation with your audience, because it's always fun to talk about these things and to have great conversations with great people. If I had to go in another order, which wouldn't be a cheat code, I'd say I'm grateful for my family. I have a family around me that knows that I can be very busy, and they adapt to me as I adapt to them. And my life wouldn't be the same if I didn't have them with me.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you for being on Leading the Way. And also to our listeners, thank you for listening in. Please sure to subscribe and like and do all those magical things so you don't miss other awesome guests coming up, just like our one today. And Stefan, thanks so much again for being on Leading the Way.
Thank you for having me. Very happy to be here.
Yep, my pleasure. All right, we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Leading the Way podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe so you won't miss other great episodes like this one. And if you're ready for more in your workplace, be sure to go to aintent.com. You'll find lots of free tools, assessments, and ways to engage directly with us to get your own epic results. We'll see you there.